everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. In this video, we are going to be continuing our Introduction to Kanji series. So this is the third video out of 3 in the series so far, and while it's not required that you watch the previous 2 before going into this one, it is somewhat recommended just to have some more contextual information. That being said, the topic in this lesson is going to be basically how to read Japanese kanji. Particularly, we're going to be covering the difference between Onyomi reading and Kunyomi reading, and just what the heck they mean in the first place and whatnot. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. Like I said, this is going to be a video that focuses on reading kanji and not so much writing kanji. So when reading kanji, it can be said that basically any given kanji character has 2 different readings, an Onyomi reading and a Kunyomi reading. Before we even delve into the technicalities of what Onyomi and Kunyomi is, it's just a matter of fact that this distinction of the readings that separates them into 2 distinct categories is actually very helpful in letting us know how to read a kanji depending on how it appears in the sentence. So first up, we're going to cover Onyomi reading, and Onyomi reading is basically just considered the original Chinese reading of a kanji character. But even though we say it's the Chinese reading of the kanji, that doesn't mean that when you read it this way, it's going to be identical to the way that you read it in Chinese, because at best, this is just what the Japanese at the time when they imported Chinese, this is basically just their best approximation of what the original Chinese pronunciation sounded like. So this reading is meant to sound like the original Chinese reading, but in most cases it's going to sound completely different, especially now that we're speaking the language in the modern era thousands of years after the fact. So why is this important? Why is knowing that this is the Chinese reading important in letting us know how to read kanji in general? Well, because it's the Chinese reading, we kind of disassociate it with hiragana and katakana, the other syllabaries of the Japanese language, which are strictly Japanese. They have nothing to do with the Chinese language. And so the key tip that this gives us as prospective Japanese kanji readers is that the Onyomi reading is something that we're going to use, generally speaking, when we see kanji being used in compound words as opposed to kanji being used alongside hiragana. So what exactly do I mean when I say compound words? That just basically means it's going to be a word with more than one kanji in it. It's basically going to stack kanji characters right next to each other to be some kind of word. So say we have some noun word and it's just consisting of 3 different kanji characters, we can kind of presume that to be something that should be read in the Onyomi reading as opposed to some kanji character that appears with hiragana characters right after it. If you take a really superficial look at the Chinese language, you'll see just a bunch of kanji characters, but when you look at the Japanese language, we see kanji characters as well as hiragana as well as katakana. So it's pretty natural thinking that when we see a word that consists of nothing but kanji, just 3, 4, 5 kanji characters stacked right next to each other, we should probably use a kind of Chinese approach to that. So how about now we jump into an example that kind of portrays this idea. So if we take the verb that we should be familiar with now, iku, and this is going to be consisting of this kanji character right here, as well as the hiragana character ku to turn it into a verb, iku, to go. So again, this is a word that we're familiar with, but this word right here is actually using not the Onyomi reading, it's using the Kunyomi reading, which we'll go more into after we cover this example. For this example, we're going to be taking that kanji character that is used in iku, and we're going to be looking at another word that it appears in as well. And that word that we're going to use is going to be ginko, and this is going to mean bank. It's a noun, and it may have been a word that we've used in previous videos, examples of previous videos, but either way, this is gonna mean bank, ginko. So we see here that this is a word that consists solely of kanji characters. The first kanji character and the second kanji character that also appears in the verb to go, iku. So that being said, since there's no hiragana like there was for the verb iku, we're probably not gonna read that character that also appears in iku as iku this time around. It's going to be a different reading. It's going to be the Onyomi reading of the character. So what is the Onyomi reading of the character? Well, that's actually something that we should know in order to be able to read at all, but of course for the sake of this video as a intro, we are going to provide the Onyomi reading, and there's actually 3 different Onyomi readings for this kanji character, so yes, it does get complicated. So the 3 Onyomi readings that we have for this character are ko, gyo, and an. And it's at this point that we don't necessarily have any more tips to let us know how to go about things. We don't know which one to use. At this point, you just kind of have to rely on context and the experience that you have from encountering the kanji character already in past sentences and past dialogue and whatnot. And so it just so happens that the Kunyomi reading that is correct for this word is the first one of the ones we listed. It's going to be ko. So this word that we have here that consists of some other kanji character and the kanji character that was in iku is going to be pronounced as we should know already because I pronounced it earlier on, ginko. And so ko is the Kunyomi reading of that kanji character right there. And the gin is the Kunyomi reading of another kanji character that's kind of relevant right now. So together they make ginko. And so that's an example of using the logic of the historical context that we received to know that we should use the Kunyomi reading of that kanji in that scenario as opposed to the Kunyomi reading, which would have resulted in something else. Let's do another quick example. Using the same kanji, we have the word kodo. And so we see here that this word, it has the kanji that we're talking about in the front this time, but it's using the same pronunciation, it's using the same Kunyomi reading because this is a word that consists primarily solely of kanji characters. So we should use the Kunyomi reading for the most part. That's the general assumption. So again, we have ko, then the do is the Kunyomi reading of some other kanji character that's kind of irrelevant right now, but together they make kodo. And we should know how to read the first half of that word, ko, as long as we know what the Kunyomi reading of that kanji character is, which we should because we just did a previous example that covered that. So that's basically what I'm saying. You have the prior encounters of that kanji character and you kind of just learn the readings and then you know which one to apply when you reach a new word that has that same character in it. And so that's how we learn kanji basically with baby steps. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the Kunyomi reading of kanji characters. And so the Kunyomi reading is as opposed to the Kunyomi reading, which is going to represent the Chinese reading. This one is going to basically be the Japanese reading of Japanese kanji characters. So how did Kunyomi reading come about? Well, Kunyomi reading is basically just a result of the Japanese historically speaking, importing the Chinese writing system into their language, then trying to integrate their Japanese vocal language into that system. So in order to do this, basically what the Japanese at the time did was that they took kanji characters and they interpreted them by the meaning that they represented, and then they took their own native Japanese words that had the same meaning as those kanji characters and associated with them. And so that's actually not a bad idea at all. Basically, they had a spoken language, but they didn't have a writing language, so they imported Chinese. Then to integrate their own language, they would take the Chinese words that had particular meanings and associated their own words that had the same meanings with those words. It's a very good integration plan, but there was one problem, and that problem is that the Chinese writing system itself kind of already had this established guideline that only one syllable should be associated with one kanji. And so the Japanese language, it had a lot of words that were way more than one syllable that they needed to associate with one kanji character. And so what could they do? Well, they did something that I don't know too much about, but what that resulted in is the modern day usage of hiragana. Basically, hiragana would fill in the part afterwards to make it longer. And then of course, hiragana would also have the further usage of denoting grammatical nuances such as tense and form and whatnot. And so yeah, that's a pretty cool history lesson and whatnot, but how can that help us right now? We just want to know how to read kanji, so stop boring us with history. Well, we're going to use that historical context and we're going to deduce that what this means is that when we see kanji used with hiragana, that's when we're going to use the Kunyomi reading, the Japanese reading, because hiragana is strictly Japanese. Is that all we've learned? Actually, no, because we can combine this with our previous knowledge. What other knowledge do we have? Well, we know that Japanese verbs, they're basically split into two categories. If we're ignoring irregular verbs, they're split into ru verbs and u verbs. And the character ru and u, what are those? Those are actually hiragana characters. So if all verbs have hiragana characters, then if we see a verb, then we know that we should read the kanji in that verb as the Kunyomi reading. That still ain't enough for you? Well, how about this? We also know that there are two kinds of adjectives in the Japanese language, e-adjectives and not-adjectives. Well, if e-adjectives are called e-adjectives because they are always going to end in the hiragana character e, then that means if we see an e-adjective, it's probably going to be read in the Kunyomi reading as well. Does the same rule apply for not-adjectives? Well, not quite, because not-adjectives at times only consist of kanji characters, but there are also some not-adjectives that have hiragana in them. and we are about to find that out in the examples that we're about to do. Okay, so first let's cover an example using an E adjective, and for the E adjective we are going to use tanoshi, which is going to translate to fun or enjoyable. Okay, so what's going on here? We have the word tanoshi, and it has a kanji character in it, but it also has two hiragana characters at the end of it. We have the character shi and we have the character e. So what does this tell us? Well, if there's hiragana included in this word, then the word is probably going to be read with the kunyomi reading. So what are the kunyomi readings to this kanji character? Well, the character has 3 onyomi readings, but hey, that's not what I just asked for. I don't care about onyomi because I've seen the hiragana right next to it. I know it's going to be kunyomi readings. So give me the choices for the kunyomi reading. And so for the kunyomi reading choices, we have tano and we have kono. And so we've reached this point, and at this point we don't have anything to tell us which one to choose, but we know from prior experience, which is basically me just saying the word to the example we're going to use, we know it's going to be tano. So we take tano and then we add it to the hiragana at the end. So we have tanoshi, and we have now correctly deciphered how to read this word that has kanji character in it. For our next 2 examples, we're going to demonstrate the difference between basically a na adjective with hiragana in it and a na adjective that just consists of kanji solely. So let's first do a na adjective that's just kanji, no hiragana at all. Well, we'll choose the na adjective kirei, which means beautiful or lovely or pretty. This is a na adjective, and the na is a hiragana character, but the thing is that even though this is a na adjective, the na doesn't appear unless you're using this adjective to modify a noun, basically. And so what that basically means is that the na isn't an official part of the word. So if we just look at the word itself, no particle na or anything, we just see 2 kanji characters. So how do we go about reading these? Well, we're going to use the onyomi reading because there's no hiragana and this is basically a compound kanji word. And so then, provided that we know the onyomi reading to the 2 kanji characters we have here, we'll be able to know how to read this word, and it'll turn out to be kirei. And so that's how simple, well, not particularly simple, but less complicated than it could be, it is to how we do this. Now let's take a look at a na adjective that actually has some hiragana in it, and we'll use the na adjective shizuka, which is going to mean quiet or silent. So we have shizuka, and it's going to be a kanji character, and right after it has the character ka, and that's hiragana. So we see hiragana, and we'll go, it's probably safer to read this with the kunyomi reading. So if we know the kunyomi reading of that kanji character, we'll know that it is shizu, so we'll pronounce this whole word shizuka, as opposed to the reading we would use if we used the onyomi reading of that character, which would either be sei or jo, and sei ka or joka is not right. So yeah, because the character ka in that word is an indispensable part of the word, it doesn't drop or add on depending on what the adjective is modifying or anything like that. It's irreplaceable. Then we know that hiragana is indispensable. Then we know that kunyomi is probably the safer bet to go about reading that word. And so yeah, those are our examples for the kunyomi reading, and we did go over an example for the onyomi reading. And so together, those are the 2 kinds of readings that you can go about for kanji characters. It definitely doesn't make things 100% easy because characters have so many darn readings, and even when you split them into 2 categories, there's still a bunch in each category, up to like 5 or 7. But yeah, this general guideline should help, even if just a little bit. And of course, know that there's always exceptions to rules. There are definitely words that will appear as compound kanji words, but you won't use the onyomi reading for those. You'll use the kunyomi reading for whatever reason, and vice versa, basically. This is a very general guideline, so it's not foolproof, and even if it was, it'd still be hard. No matter what, if you're gonna plan on knowing how to read Japanese, you're gonna have to put in the load of time and effort, but this is definitely a good tip to know from the very start to save you a lot of time of that enormous amount of time that you're going to have to put in. And last but not least, I do want to point out that again, if you're just starting into kanji, then there are a lot of valuable resources to use online. Jisho is definitely a very valuable online resource. All you have to do is go there, you type in a kanji character, it'll show you all of its kunyomi readings, it'll show you all of its onyomi readings, and it'll even list a bunch of words that that kanji is used in, so you can witness the words that that kanji character is used in. And so yeah, that is going to wrap it up for this lesson, onyomi and kunyomi reading for kanji characters, and how they definitely help you in encountering new kanji words. And yeah, the adventure goes on.